Remember when Ray Dalio said, "Oh, it's so good the government's going to ban it," and then you're like, "But then guess what? The government said they're going to actually embrace it." Okay, there's Ray. We got him. You remember when Larry Fink said this is an index of money laundering, and then he said that before he said, "Well, it looks like it's going to change the world" in his shareholder letter.
From journalists to celebrities, CEO of giant corporations, financial regulators, world leaders, and politicians, many prominent people criticize cryptocurrency and blockchain technology in its early stages. But the narrative has changed almost overnight. And why has it changed? Because the space has proven critics wrong at every turn. It continues to do so to date. First, they thought it would collapse almost immediately after it started. It did not. Instead, it has continued to thrive and flourish. Then they said the government would ban it, but that also did not happen. With Biden's executive order on cryptocurrencies outlining the importance of crypto and other digital assets to Americans, we can be sure there will not be any ban or strict regulations in the future. Critics have thrown many other weapons at the crypto space, but it has surpassed each one with ease. Now, many of those critics are employing the popular saying, if you can't beat them, you join them. In this video, we will be examining the words of a former crypto critic who has now become one of its loudest advocates. Michael Saylor, the CEO and co-founder of MicroStrategy, was once a crypto critic. In fact, he predicted that the space would collapse and go away like online gambling. But it didn't. Instead, it restored Saylor's billionaire status and saved his company from being inflated away with the dollar. In a recent interview, Saylor talks about former crypto critics, including himself, that have turned to embrace the space. He explains that this should be a source of motivation for prospective investors who are still on the sidelines. We will get to Saylor's part in a bit. Before we do, please take a little time to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Enjoy.
My eureka moment, and I tell people, Bill, what was your eureka moment? It was when Michael Saylor explained to me that Bitcoin was attacked 8,500 times by different competitors and withstood the test of time over the 10 or 12 years. I don't know if you remember that conversation, Michael, but we did it on a Salt Talk.
Yeah.
I turned to my team and said, okay, we are not long enough of this stuff. We have to. And by the way,
Anthony, you're still not long enough.
I know that. But here, this is the question I had for both of you. Not only am I not long enough, but I'm up against the institutional forces of the granny state. Okay, let me tell you what the granny state is. Granny state is the Warren Buffett, Charlie Munger, old fogey state, where I've got a lot of clients that are listening to it being rat poison squared, worst thing that's ever happened to the civilization. And so I'm in a constant battle with that, guys. And so my question back to you guys is like, what do you say to the propeller head ignoramus at Morgan Stanley who is doing the due diligence on my fund that blocks people from getting into my fund because it has 20% exposure to Bitcoin? And Michael's right, maybe it should have 60. But by the way, Michael, you and I both know my fund's going to have 60% exposure to Bitcoin with me not doing anything.
Exactly.
Because Bitcoin's going to go from 45 to 200,000. So
Bitcoin's going to fix you, right? Bitcoin fixes everything you plug it into.
No, I understand that. But my point is, what do you say? Because, this show's awesome. There's 7,000 or 8,000 people watching. They all get it. But what do you say to the granny state? Okay, my self-described group of people who either won't listen or, I can't lose my job. Bitcoin sounds crazy. I'm not going to lose my job over that. Dude, I'm trying to pull you into the future. And by the way,
this is so hard, Mooch. Look, this is Upton Sinclair quote. It is impossible to convince somebody of something when their livelihood depends on them not understanding it, right? Absolute, that's the problem. And to your point, okay, Jamie Dimon, it's a fraud. Yet his own firm puts out a 196-page report saying it's the future of finance. Then Warren, it's rat poison squared. But Charlie, not to be outdone, says Bitcoin is like trading in newly harvested dead baby brains. What the fuck, Charlie? Newly harvested dead baby brains? What the? I mean, seriously, why does he say that?
Let's be constructive and cheerful about this. Look, I think we're winning the battle, right? I mean, if you look at every single critic, you could make a list of 100 critics of Bitcoin and digital property over the past 5 years.
Battle.
Right? I mean, You know, Larry Fink was a rampant critic, and he's starting to sound like an advocate now. Blankfein, you know, David Solomon, right? The presidents of and the heads of every major bank, they've all flipped. First, they embrace it with analysis. Then they'll, Ken Griffin was a critic, and now he's flipped to start trading it, right? So all the major Wall Street hedge funds and the major banks and the major regulators were much more critical 24 months and 36 months ago than they are today. I think I would approach the skeptics and I would say, look, Joe Biden says that it's really important to 40 million Americans. You know, what do you think about? Generally, the president has a lot of power, Anthony, right? I've noticed the presidents of the United States are able to encourage all sorts of behaviors. Some of them I don't even, advocate, but they have a lot of power. And I think you could go and say, look, Janet Yellen, who's the Secretary of the Treasury, hear her words. I mean, if you look at what I tweeted before I got on this call, I grabbed that 97 seconds, of fame that we started the show with, and I grabbed Yellen's quote. The quote is, "Crypto has grown by leaps and bounds and is now playing a significant role in the investment decisions of lots of Americans. We would like to create a regulatory environment in which healthy innovation can continue." That is Janet Yellen to Andrew Ross Sorkin this morning.
Saylor speaks further about prospective investors who are still skeptical about the continued survival and growth of the space. He explains that these prospective investors are of two types: those who can think for themselves and those who need validation from others before they invest. If you are in the first category, Saylor says you only need to do a few hours of extensive research to be convinced about investing in cryptocurrencies. For the people in the second category, he uses the example of previous critics, including himself, that have come to realize the value of investing in digital assets.
Okay, so I think you've got two sets of people. You've got the people that kind of think for themselves and they derive from first principles. They have to have a certain educational background, a certain life background, and they got to invest anywhere from 10 to 100 hours. And to those people, you say, hey, you think for yourself and you're pretty smart. Would you like to make $1 billion? If so, I need you to spend 10 to 100 hours. If you're just so rich that the opportunity cost of your time is higher and you don't want to invest 100 hours to make $1 billion, then I guess you can go focus on something else. That's what I would say to them, right? And there's another group of people that don't really like to strike out on their own, and they like to follow what their leaders tell them. And that means very powerful politicians and institutional leaders and leaders in Wall Street. And to them, I would say, well, I made a list of every Wall Street leader in the past 12 months that flipped their tune. Remember when Ray Dalio said, oh, it's so good the government's going to ban it? And then you're like, but then guess what? The government said they're going to actually embrace it. Okay, there's Ray. We got him. You remember when Larry Fink said this is an index of money laundering? And then, oh, yeah, well, he said that before he said, well, it looks like it's going to change the world in his shareholder letter. You remember when Michael Saylor bought nearly $4 billion, like 3.95 something billion dollars of Bitcoin. By the way, Anthony, I am like 1,000% committed. I started with 400 million of capital and I managed to buy 4 billion in Bitcoin. I don't believe in 5% allocation or 60% allocation. I believe in 500% allocation. So the Michael Saylor dude in 2013 said, it's only a matter of time before this stuff goes the way of online gambling. It's going away. The world's full of skeptics that flip their tune. There would be 24 of them. In fact, you can, if I were you, because you're more organized than me and you're a professional and I just get on crypto Banter and I ramble. If I was you, I'd make a list of like 50 billionaires or 50 CEOs of $100 billion banks. And I would say, this is the list of people that were skeptical, and then they became supporters, enthusiasts. Yeah. By the way, Janet Yellen, I parsed the quote, but if you read the entire 97 seconds, she says, of course I was initially skeptical, but now I understand, right? Andrew Ross Sorkin. I can make a list of 100 influential, powerful, wealthy people that were skeptical, that are enthusiastic. you ought to just like serve up that list. These are all the people, you know, and then you say, you're right, you should be skeptical. They didn't become enthusiastic until they spent 10 to 100 hours. And if you're that rational thinker, you should start skeptical and then do the work if it's worth money to you. If you have, you know, why don't certain people that are in their 80s or 90s with $100 billion, why don't they do the work? Well, the answer is no character flaw on their part. You know, no offense, but when I'm 95 years old, I'm not going to be spending 500 hours trying to figure out the next telepathic form of money. I'm going to be relaxing. And if you poke me and say, what do you think about telepathic money that comes out of like fungi that we, you know, called in a DNA amplified petri dish? I'm going to be like, it sounds like something scary to me. I'm not a big fan. Mm-hmm. And then somebody will run a thing saying 95-year-old Saylor didn't endorse my telepathic money. But the point is, like, just don't poke the bear, right?
Of giant corporations and government regulators with unlimited resources have found that the cryptocurrency market is a worthy investment, and there is no more doubt of its legitimacy and worth. Thanks for watching the video. Let us know what you think in the comments section below. And remember to give this video a thumbs up.